So, welcome to everybody. We just had this very interesting panel on the regulatory framework, considering, in fact, issues on regulation and over-regulation. And we are now heading to our third and last panel on a European digital infrastructure for AI, infrastructure being another key issue for European AI. But before this, we have the pleasure to have a keynote statement by Cédric, Secretary of State for the Digital Sector of France. Let's listen to him.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous et merci de me proposer aujourd'hui d'intervenir devant vous. C'est pour moi l'occasion de revenir sur une naissance qui nous tient beaucoup à cœur avec le Canada mais également avec l'ensemble des membres fondateurs. C'est la naissance du partenariat mondial pour l'intelligence artificielle. Alors, ce partenariat mondial, il naît d'une prise de conscience qui est celle de la nécessité d'une coopération à l'échelle internationale pour à la fois exploiter le plein potentiel de l'intelligence artificielle, mais également pour le faire et la développer en respectant les valeurs démocratiques et les valeurs humanistes qui ont toujours été celles de l'Europe. C'est pourquoi, avec beaucoup de membres fondateurs, la France, l'Allemagne, l'Italie, le Royaume-Uni, la Slovénie ou encore l'Union européenne, mais aussi 11 membres fondateurs dans l'ensemble du monde entier, nous nous sommes unis pour créer le partenariat mondial pour l'intelligence artificielle qui représente quelque part un très bel élan international et transnational. Le projet, c'est de conjuguer à la fois une confiance dans l'intelligence artificielle, dans les potentialités, dans ce qu'elle va nous apporter, dans sa capacité à nous améliorer la vie quotidienne des Européens et des citoyens du monde, mais également une volonté d'encadrer, de guider ou en tout cas de développer une intelligence artificielle, des usages technologiques qui doivent être complètement en ligne avec les principes démocratiques de l'Europe et notre bien-être collectif. C'est une initiative qui a été lancée par le Canada lors de sa présidence du G7. C'est une initiative que nous avons prolongée l'été dernier lors du sommet de Biarritz, encore une fois dans le cadre du G7, et qui a requis beaucoup d'efforts pour faire en sorte que ce partenariat mondial pour l'intelligence artificielle, sur lequel nous avons travaillé depuis de longs mois, il puisse aboutir. Nous avons regroupé des pays européens qui partageaient les mêmes valeurs d'ouverture, les mêmes valeurs d'humanisme, mais également des pays non européens, comme l'Australie, la Nouvelle-Zélande, l'Inde ou dernièrement les États-Unis, pour travailler tous ensemble sur cette question de la manière dont nous voulons voir évoluer l'intelligence artificielle et pour travailler tous ensemble dans la création d'un consensus autour de ce que doit être l'intelligence artificielle. Cela a conduit l'officialisation du partenariat mondial pour l'intelligence artificielle dans les dernières semaines, qui, je pense, doit être conçu par nous tous comme un succès pour les valeurs européennes. Nous avons eu par le passé des succès importants, des éléments d'influence importants comme le RGPD, qui aujourd'hui est une valeur, un ancrage européen qui crée des résultats, qui a emmené toute une partie du monde et devenu quelque part une certaine norme. Je pense que dans l'intelligence artificielle, l'Europe doit tenir sa place. C'est un beau premier résultat, il doit en appeler plusieurs autres. Je pense notamment à deux éléments. D'abord, c'est que nous devons faire grossir la coalition autour du PMIA, autour de toutes ces personnes qui pensent que l'intelligence artificielle doit être fondée sur les droits de l'homme, sur l'inclusion, sur la diversité, tout en gardant sa notion d'innovation et de croissance économique. Et nous devons faire en sorte qu'il y ait plus de pays qui rejoignent cette dynamique. La deuxième chose, c'est qu'il faut que, tout comme le GIEC ou les travaux sur la question de l'environnement ont produit des résultats extrêmement concrets, nous puissions là aussi arriver à des résultats extrêmement concrets le plus rapidement possible. J'espère que pourront être ainsi publiés avant la fin de l'année même les premiers travaux sur un certain nombre de sujets. Il y en a qui nous semblent plus urgents que les autres. Par exemple, du côté positif, la question de la lutte contre la pandémie du Covid-19 et l'aide de l'intelligence artificielle. Des questions absolument cruciales comme l'interopérabilité des données ou la fiabilité des algorithmes. En tout cas, il s'agit pour les deux centres d'expertise qui ont déjà été constitués, l'un à Paris, l'autre à Montréal, avec l'objectif de regrouper les meilleurs experts, de pouvoir rendre un certain nombre de conclusions le plus rapidement possible. Je pense qu'il ne faut pas voir ce partenariat mondial pour l'intelligence artificielle comme une nouvelle initiative institutionnelle qui crée des doublons. Ce que nous cherchons à faire, c'est de prolonger les réflexions que nous avons au niveau européen sur la question de l'éthique de l'intelligence artificielle et de créer du consensus, notamment au sein des académiques et des industriels. Tout comme avec le GIEC et les travaux sur l'environnement, nous avons créé du consensus avant de produire des normes. Il ne s'agit pas tant là de produire des normes et des cadres d'intervention, mais de faire en sorte que dans un travail entre académiques, entre praticiens de l'intelligence artificielle, avec aussi des institutionnels, on puisse éclairer les décideurs publics, à la fois en dressant un état des lieux et un état de l'art des pratiques des dispositifs, et également en s'interrogeant sur le cadre d'intervention qui doit être celui de l'intelligence artificielle dans un certain nombre de domaines, comme l'avenir du travail, comme la gouvernance des données, comme l'innovation ou comme la commercialisation. Ce qu'il s'agit de faire ici, c'est de renforcer le consensus international pour venir alimenter ce qui doit être la décision politique. Alors, évidemment, l'action de ce PMEA, elle devra s'inscrire complètement dans la droite ligne des orientations qui ont été portées par l'Union européenne sur l'intelligence artificielle et une intelligence artificielle de confiance, et je pense notamment aux travaux qui ont été menés par le groupe d'experts de haut niveau et qui ont donné lieu sur la base de production nationale, mais également sur la base de production transeuropéenne, à des conclusions extrêmement intéressantes, et je pense qu'on doit d'ailleurs renforcer cette initiative. Un dernier mot pour vous dire que d'abord il faut que la plupart des pays, l'ensemble des pays membres de l'Union européenne viennent adhérer au partenariat mondial pour l'intelligence artificielle. C'est absolument indispensable que chacun puisse venir grossir cette dynamique, parce que plus nous serons nombreux, plus nous pèserons dans les débats internationaux, plus nous pèserons sur cette question des valeurs et des normes. Et il faut qu'après la première vague qui a été celle des membres fondateurs, nous puissions avoir le maximum de pays européens qui viennent, dans une deuxième vague, s'inscrire dans cette dynamique. Le deuxième élément, c'est pour vous dire que, d'une certaine manière, la dynamique qui a été enclenchée depuis 6 mois au sein de l'Union européenne, au sein de la Commission, avec les pays membres, est absolument importante. Malgré la crise sanitaire, malgré les difficultés que nous avons tous connues, depuis 6 mois, l'Europe avance sur le numérique comme elle n'a jamais avancé. C'est le fruit du travail des commissaires Breton et Vestager, que je veux vraiment remercier pour leur implication, qui ont permis de faire émerger la question de l'intelligence artificielle, de faire émerger la question du cloud, d'avoir cette stratégie européenne extrêmement offensive dans un monde dont on connaît la compétition et l'engagement des autres grands ensembles du monde sur la question du numérique, mais également sur cette question de la régulation qu'on aborde ici à travers le PMIA, mais qui est aussi qui couvre aussi des sujets de concurrence, des sujets de contenu. Enfin, sur ces deux jambes qui sont celles de l'innovation, de la compétitivité, et puis des valeurs qui, au fond, sont celles de l'histoire de l'Europe, et sur lesquelles nous devons nous appuyer pour faire en sorte que l'Europe porte haut ses valeurs, que l'Europe porte haut ce qu'elle représente et ce à quoi elle veut que le monde ressemble dans les prochaines années. Mais comme on dit souvent, pour pouvoir être à la table, il faut être considéré comme techniquement capable, et c'est pour ça qu'on a aussi besoin d'une manche innovation. En tout cas, je pense que ces 6 derniers mois ont été extrêmement enthousiasmants et que nous aurons l'occasion d'en reparler très très vite, parce qu'il s'agit là encore d'une question vitale.
Well, this is very interesting indeed, this global partnership on artificial intelligence, highlighting that Europe will build its own model also by interacting with non-European countries. And this new partnership is a very fertile place for Europe to develop further on its model. So we will be now. What do you think, Daniel and Yann, about this partnership?
I would agree to that especially the thing with Canada and the participation with Montreal and Paris is very interesting. And Europe, artificial intelligence is a European question, but it's also a global question, and that Cédric addressed very well.
Yes, I think the Mr. Cédric made it, and I love the last name. Oh, I must say, and I must emphasize that I'm a big, huge fan of just one-letter last names. I think he emphasized very well how all-inclusive Europe must be when regulating AI. So it's a very important European question, but it's also very important that Europe be on the forefronts of regulations, just like it did with GDPR, and that we have a trademark of European values within those AI principles. And I think it was a really, really nice speech. I understood every word in French. It was beautiful. I didn't even need the subtitles. But we have also a very interesting panel coming up, right?
Yeah,
yes, indeed. We have now our last panel, our third and last panel on infrastructures. It will be moderated by Antoine Couret, President of Hub France IA. And we wish you all a great panel session.
See you later.
Enjoy.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Lars, are you based in Dortmund?
Yes, I am.
Okay. We are online, or?
I think we're live, ready to go.
Okay, so hello everybody. So let me introduce the last panel of the day. It's a pleasure to have this panel with all the countries, France, Germany, and Croatia. So let me introduce Izabel, which is based in Pula, a lovely place, one of the more loveliest places in Croatia, with great beaches and so on. And also Roman, I think some many Roman sites. Lars, which is from IDSA and which is based in Dortmund. So, and finally Yann, which I think is based in Paris.
Absolutely.
So it's a pleasure to have this panel on European digital infrastructure. And so Lars is CEO of the IDSA, International Data Space Association, which is one of the first initiatives for data sharing and also that, and especially data standardization in Europe, and which will be very interesting. Izabel is also an entrepreneur who founded Infobip now more than 50 years ago, and which is now a global company in more than 60 countries and with more than 2,000 employees. So it's a large success, a large European success globally. And finally, Yann, which is also a seasoned entrepreneur with different companies at its own, and which is now the CEO of Scaleway, a French data center provider. So maybe as Cédric introduced the debate, especially on innovation and competition, but with European values or even more global values with Canada and with other countries outside of Europe. I would like to discuss with you, Lars, Izabel, and Yann, that we consider now that digitalization and AI are deploying faster and faster, but as well the landscape is moving fast, there is a big momentum on digitization and also on AI. But on your point of view, on your different point of view, especially in terms of competition, how do you consider the European providers are able to face a fair competition with other players? And is regulation also, is European regulation an help for you? And finally, based on competition and regulation, do you think that as on other markets, we have something like a sovereignty reflex in our choice, especially in the B2B market? So I let you, if you like, Izabel, you can start.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Also, thank you for the kind words for Croatia. It is true that here is really sunny and shiny, and actually this year there is no so many tourists here, so it's even better. It's no such rush as usual during the summer. Anyway, so just a few words related to my background. I'm CTO of Infobip, and you mentioned all these numbers. Infobip is a company established 15 years ago, and today we provide the world's largest communication infrastructure for A2P business. So our clients are almost in every country. So in EU, but of course not only EU, we are present in Asia, in Africa, in both Americas, and I can proudly say that we have biggest telco network for A2P. We are connected to the more than 700 telecom operators, and our clients are the biggest names in Silicon Valley, biggest banks in EU, but also in Africa and Asia. Okay, this would be, I believe, enough for the start. Related to digitalization and AI. Digitalization is actually some prerequisite to be able to use AI. You have to make company digital and all the data accessible by improving processes, improving metrics, and there is the place when AI come into place and can do its own role. As Yann mentioned on the intro, actually, EU set a really good example about the main line about GDPR, about data privacy, and how the data should be handled. And it shows that EU recognizes the power of data. However, this is only a basic thing. How to be competitive and how to provide a good answer against the companies from the US and China that are doing really big things already about the AI. I think the most important part is not to be closed only in EU as a region. We have to understand that we have to go globally. We should not limit ourselves toward only EU. The AI must be global business, and the more data you have, you will have more quality. So being global is something that is like prerequisite in order to be able to compete with the companies from other parts of the world.
Okay, and Yann, do you think we have all the tools to be global?
Well, I think if we start analyzing the fundamentals, it turns out that the EU does not have the same reflexes as, say, the US, for instance. If you look back, decades ago, 50 years ago perhaps, the US had very ambitious plans. And they organized the DARPA, and the DARPA funded the internet, and out of that they also created moonshots, right? They went to the moon thanks to DARPA. So this sort of ambitious planning, financially motivated as well, created a new industry for them. And it was reinforced by the Small Business Administration, which created the Small Business Act. So in the US, there is a sort of natural protective environment conducive to more business, more local business. And of course, the US is a federation of states. So they function as a federation. In Europe, we do not have such a thing. The EU was built on the ashes of the Second World War, and the project was very idealistic. So my view is that even though we do have the skills and possibly the infrastructure, we do not have the same reflexes when it comes to business, which makes us an easy target because we are, a very large market to tap into, 500 million people, and it's always good to remind ourselves as Europeans that we are, in fact, a very large continent with a lot of skills available, right here, and so for the US, which is a driving force when we're talking about software in general, but also AI, of course, which is the extension of software. The EU is an easy target, and so as a result, there is an imbalance that is created. So to me, before we talk about regulation, because regulation is a way to rebalance things, but usually the regulator steps in way too late because the players have already moved on to the next target. So as Europeans, we tend to regulate, and I really like what we've done with GDPR, even though GDPR does not necessarily help the economy, it helps the end consumer. And we've exported those ideas even to California, where they're now being influenced by our way of thinking about personal data. But coming back to how we can prepare ourselves to build sovereignty and to avoid always systematically having to regulate post factum, my point of view is that we should think in terms of who we are and our roots. And our roots are, as Europeans, is not so much, I think, anchored in Second World War. Our roots are anchored in Renaissance, on which were based human rights, actually. Cédric mentioned them as well. I think we need to seize the occasion to build on top of that and build Renaissance 2.0, leveraging our skills, leveraging our infrastructure, leveraging our natural market. Again, 500 million people who have consuming power, which is on par with the US and China. So we have nothing that prevents us to build this sort of sovereignty, which doesn't mean that things have to be black and white. But how we do that? Well, the context is very favorable. There's global awareness, general awareness about our weaknesses, and I think now is the time to seize that and organize ourselves as Europeans, thinking as individual parts in a federation where certain countries will have strengths, others weaknesses, and that we just need to connect and think together about these issues. And AI sits on top of the data, which sits on top of the infrastructure. And at Scaleway, we are a typical cloud provider, also known as a hyperscaler, where we provide public cloud services. And we think ourselves as an enabler from Europe, in Europe, for Europe, and beyond, of course.
And finally, Lars, from your point of view and from Germany, how do you see the evolution of the competition also on regulation? Do you think that Europe has the right strengths to boost data and data usage all over globally?
Yeah, thank you for having invited me here, and Yann, congratulations to this great initial statement. So I think it explains perfectly the setup of our times and how we should shape the data economy. So bringing everything in place so that AI can really become an advantage, a competitive advantage of Europe, and well, based on the European values, which obviously occur from the Renaissance. So that's great. So perhaps my views on this sovereignty reflects. I think what we really have in hands and what is written in the values of Europe is the power of the many, and I think that is a guiding principle in AI, but in the whole data economy. So really using all these federal achievements or federated achievements, so from different companies, different countries, different people all over Europe, and create something big out of it. And one core element in this is well, what we call the digital sovereignty, which will be a competitive advantage for the European economy. Well, it will be a boost for European AI technology and projects if we really make a European data space happen. So the one and only space where we bring in as many data, as many insight as possible, combined of all domain-specific data spaces, and then boost the future value creation. So digital sovereignty is the power to make decisions how digital processes, infrastructures, and the movement of data are structured, built, and managed. And for example, the Gaia X architecture, but there are other initiatives and endeavors out there. It outlines the technical solution to establish a digital sovereignty according to EU standards. And one particular important aspect of digital sovereignty is data sovereignty. So data sovereignty is the execution of full control and governance by a data provider over data location and usage of data. And this is what we define in the reference architecture of International Data Spaces Association. So we as a non-for-profit organization with more than 110 companies from more than 20 countries are jointly working on this. And sovereignty in this regard means that companies are very confident about what happens to their data, so that they really like to share data easily. And we have to ensure this by shaping and designing data spaces following some common and jointly agreed important design principles. We have to find the balance between the insight in the value of the data set with a wish to protect it on the one hand side, and the insight to share data in order to increase value creation. And we have to agree on a governance for data sharing, and at the same time provide profound technical measures to protect data and to enforce usage constraints. And this is really important, and that is what we need an infrastructure for. Finally, this must hold true for any domain, and so we need to agree on standards for all of this. And by applying all these core architectural principles mentioned before, the European Strategy for Data and large-scale projects like AI for EU and Gaia X, always following the design principles for data spaces, they will enable providers and consumers to participate in a digital sovereign ecosystem.
Okay, thanks a lot, Lars. But because then it looks like that we have some strengths and some differentiator, especially on how we manage data. But just Izabel, a feedback from the ground. How do you see how evolves the competition, especially in data center, and how US company also spread their data center all over the world?
Mm-hmm. So the main thing is that everyone is trying to do global business. So I'm kind of a bit not afraid, but yes, let's say afraid if we just focus on Europe. If you take a look at, I don't know, Microsoft or Amazon with AWS or any other big player in AI world, you know, they have presence in Europe, but they have also presence in Africa. They have presence in Asia. In, I don't know, Microsoft Asia has 3 data centers in Asia, in India only. So I think we should always plan to go in such direction. Because Europe is good and great economies are here, but the number of people and the emerging market that are growing in especially in Asia are where the real fight will happen. So this is something that I feel that this is something that we have to take care about really seriously, and all the projects that are striving to do something must be able to scale globally. It won't work if they are somehow present only on EU part of the world. If you just take a number of people, you know, we all know for the data that in Asia there is 4.6 billion people. In Africa it's 1.3, but it's rising hugely. And you know, in Europe, number of people is actually falling down. So the real battles about the data, about the AI will happen elsewhere, and we must be prepared for this. And the competitors that you mentioned are really preparing. They are building data centers, they are building their own infrastructure. We need to do something along these lines.
Okay, thanks a lot, Izabel. Especially to have this feedback from the ground and sometimes from the real world also. Maybe because based on this, what we described, there are, by the way, also large initiatives in Europe, especially on infrastructure, but also on data. The last one, which is Gaia X, was announced now I think 3 or 4 weeks ago by Meyer and Bruno Le Maire, especially to federate and promote European tech providers. Maybe because most of you are part of the initiative. Maybe could you explain, starting with Lars, how Gaia X could help to boost globally the European tech? What are the main objectives? And most of all, because we must be very pragmatic, what is the future roadmap and for end of 2020, but also for 2021, to make this sovereignty happen in Europe and also globally? Yeah, go on, Lars.
Okay. Yes. Well, what can we expect? What can we be happy about? Well, there are Gaia X for sure. It is well starting now. Perhaps it's already it has already started. But there are also other endeavors to create like trustworthy data sharing infrastructures. And we encountered in the last years, so in the last 2 or 3 years, that there were a lot of initiatives out there, most of them from projects, but also some industry-driven initiatives, which really put data spaces at the core of what they were doing. And what they all of them encountered is one-to-one data sharing is always easy. Few-to-few data sharing is also more or less easy, especially when there's a focal company in the game which defines all the rules and everything. But when it comes to really many-to-many ecosystems and like dynamic networks where there are partners jumping in and stepping out easily, and perhaps they share only once the data with the other participants in such an ecosystem, then we see that we need more flexible infrastructures for data sharing. And then if you want to take storage of data into consideration, you also have to talk about the underneath layer of architectures which have to tackle this. And so in the last year, we saw a lot of example where things happen. So in IDSA, we have like 90 projects which are close to market adoption, and we see it in several domains. So in the logistics domain, in the manufacturing domain, these are definitely the front runners. And now it's close to market adoption. And therefore, we have to plant sovereignty in all these data sharing infrastructure efforts, because this has been missing in all the approaches of the past. So in the first, we need really unlimited interoperability to really bring as many data as endpoints as possible into the game, so that we can really enlarge the quality of analytics, of AI, and all the value creation based on data. Then, as these networks are more and more dynamic and larger, we have to talk about the trust, and mostly we're talking about different security domains, so we have to talk about this. And then data as an economic asset, we have to talk about the governance. And well, there are already first solutions with all these features built inside developed, and there are services out there which provide, for example, digital identities or a brokerage functionality with which can tackle these. And well, now with Gaia-X in place, this will all probably speed up, and then there will be a lot of projects on the European level, well, related to the European strategy for data in different data spaces in key sectors. And what we can see very soon, so in the beginning of 2021, is from Gaia-X, the first so-called federation services. So all the services which we need to really provide sovereignty, the catalog of federated cloud and edge offerings which can be used and stick together for a large and competitive offering. And then, so this will happen. We will have the first demonstrator up and running at the first quarter of 2021. This is the goal, and I'm very convinced that the founding members of the Gaia Foundation will really bring this in place, as Gaia-X is really a large community where several hundred companies are already already part of it. And then we will probably also in 2021 have the first certification. Combining data sovereignty, so sovereignty for data in use, and sovereignty for data in rest, so storage and processing of data and usage of data. So both combined in Gaia-X, and therefore there will be a certification in place so that you can really be sure that you have a sovereign solution for this. And well, perhaps we will see first products of this at the end of this year, but next year we will see large proof of principle of this, and then it will become evident if we really reach the goal of setting up a European, well, tech alternative.
Thanks a lot, Lars. And Yann, on your side, because your Scaleway is a part of Gaia-X, how do you see the Gaia-X project on the infrastructure side?
So yes, I'm with Lars as a founding member, and what's interesting with this initiative is that it's extremely pragmatic. So I believe that the impulsion came from the Germans, and then Bruno Le Maire joined the initiative. And what we have now is a construct with 11 members on each side, but the goal is clearly European. In other words, the idea was to bootstrap the initiative with two major countries within Europe, but we are already opening up to every other member state. And so Gaia X is really a novel initiative in the sense that in the past, even we can talk about France, attempted to build an infrastructure from the ground up, but you cannot do that because creating a cloud infrastructure in a modern sense is extremely complex, requires a lot of capital, but also requires probably entrepreneurial, energy, which you cannot pay for. Entrepreneurial energy comes from within. And so what Gaia X recognized is that you had already a number of players in the field that together assembled both a panel of cloud service providers and institutions and clients potentially in a form of SaaS players or IaaS players or PaaS players. And all of this together creates a consortium that tries to bring a new type of vehicle to the European marketplace, which is not regulation-driven. Gaia X is solutions-driven, right? So if you look at the design thinking approach, it's all about providing the clients, the end users, the proper single point of shopping, right? So Gaia X at some point allows you to consume something which actually should be considered a commodity today. When we talk about the cloud and data processing and AI on top of that, it's all about commodities. We talk about compute, right? CPUs or GPUs. We talk about storage and we talk about transit. And these things actually are fairly standard, right? Today we talk about virtual machines, we talk about object or block storage or databases, and we talk about transfer between nodes. And so we have these things. Scaleway is a relatively small cloud service provider, but we have every single building block that is available in the usual suspects out west in California or in Asia. For instance, we have NVIDIA compute systems, right? GPUs. We have at least a petaflops worth of GPUs available for tomorrow morning for anyone who needs it, right? This is a commodity. So today, European clients can come to us to consume, but they may not know about us, or they may not have the trust that is necessary to embark in a large-scale project because we are in France and perhaps in Croatia, the person who's deciding does not know about us. And so through Gaia X, we are building the equivalent of a multi-cloud approach, which is available today, where you can pick and choose from different providers. We are creating a sort of meta-cloud, a sort of architecture on top that brings together multiple players so that you can purchase, acquire, consume the three commodities that I talked about, which is compute, storage, and transit, from one single interface, the Gaia X interface. And so that is interesting because it is a very pragmatic approach from a European perspective. In other words, this was built from a consortium of companies from two countries, France and Germany, very quickly opening up to the rest of Europe, in other words, being given back to the EU community, so that we can have a built-in sovereignty in this vehicle, right? So it's pretty ambitious because by 2021, we need to actually deliver a lot of value. But at the same time, it's about visibility. It's about making sure that our best assets are being brought forward to a fairly unified market, the EU market. And my point of view is that with Gaia X or the general awareness, and we can talk about individual awareness, we can talk about corporate awareness, we can talk about national awareness, and of course, federal awareness. Once you have this awareness, then there is no reason, absolutely no reason, that the EU should not provide up to 30% of its own infrastructure needs, right? There is no reason we should not be part of the conversation up to a third of our needs. And if we're ambitious, we'll go, west, and we'll grab 30% of the US market and 30% of the Asian market and 30%, like Izabel said, of the African market. There is no reason why we should not be able to, number one, service ourselves, number two, expand outwards. Right now, when we talk about infrastructure, the EU is largely underserving itself. We're talking 10, 15% at most, which means the conversation is largely driven by California and China in general. So Gaia-X is really something that should be celebrated because of its very pragmatic approach. And then, of course, every single one of us plays a role. When we talk about sovereignty, well, we can talk about personal sovereignty. My personal data, where does it live? Do I care? Am I willing to pay a little more to get my personal sovereignty? Well, GDPR is about that. Choosing an EU provider, if I'm a decision maker in a corporation, well, I play a role when I decide to go through Gaia-X or through an EU provider. And then at the national level, in France, for instance, we have a number of initiatives that also try and help the public buyers, the government, to purchase the right cloud provider, including US providers. Of course, there's nothing wrong purchasing services from US providers. But at the same time, if the public administration is not aware that they can purchase locally equivalent services, then they won't do it, right? And finally, the federal level, again, as I said earlier, I think we have a shot right now, right here, right now, to seize the awareness, to build Renaissance 2.0.
Thanks a lot, Yann, for all this large perspective on as well Gaia-X and sovereignty. A question to Izabel also on Gaia-X, because you have a special view on the global market. Do you think that initiatives like Gaia-X and the IDSA could be a good and powerful strength for Europe to go global, and especially as well in the US, because actually the main market share in Europe on data center and AI is mainly with US products, but also now we also have Alibaba with different data centers and also Tencent in Europe. And so do you think that initiative like Gaia-X with the European value is also a strength for European digital tech to go global as well in the US, but also in China?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I must admit that for Gaia-X, I'm not really familiar with this. So I heard like a few days ago, first time, and just have some time to take a look at the web pages. And congratulations to everyone involved. Seems like a very ambitious project, and there'll be, I'm sure, great things during the next year. From my perspective, my first problem is that really I was not aware that this is happening. So even if I'm looking for some kind of deploying infrastructure, I didn't know that there is such project as a Gaia-X. And another thing is that I really think that all the companies that are, as you probably noticed that I mentioned for a few times, companies need to be able to scale globally. And we have, let's say in our company, we have teams that are specialized for AWS. We have teams specialized for Azure. And then for us, it's easy to go to AWS or Azure and then use some of them cloud services. We have also our own equipment, so we have specialized also for the on-premise for physical servers. However, introducing Gaia-X only for EU doesn't work for me, because I will get some knowledge. I'll have to learn about it. I need to integrate this, and I will use it only for one use case. So I really, for this kind of project and business, I need to I need help to build operations globally, not only on one place. So this, I guess, won't work at this time for me, but hopefully, as you mentioned, maybe if later you manage to do to deploy in US or in Asia, it should work. I saw in the comments here that someone is mentioning China and Alibaba and Tencent. However, I didn't mention those China company because I find them hard to compare in terms of government and the ways things work in China and the EU. So it was out of scope for this conversation.
Okay, thanks a lot for your feedback, Izabel, and especially I think indeed that mixing as well large initiatives like GAIA-X to strengthen the European tech, but also to be very, very pragmatic and to localize the European tech in the different regions of the world will potentially be the good mix for European to go global. Also to be very pragmatic, because of course in each of our countries we faced the COVID crisis, and all of us also experienced that it has changed the relation to digitalization, but also to our personal relation to our data, but to our personal data, but globally also to data as well, especially of course on health, but also on privacy, especially with the different matching apps and so on. And so of course, like in many crises, strengths and weaknesses became even more obvious, but especially on data, when we see during the crisis that the USA and China are quite advanced on how to manage patient data, CT scan for to detect the disease and so on. We find that in Europe it's not even quite and so easy to access data or to share data even in different within the European space, but between different European countries. And based on what we lived, what we experienced during the crisis, do you think that Europe could take advantage of the crisis and to go on the next challenge of data and AI to create its own tech and to promote it to the world? Do you think that the crisis will be a new start for Europe? Mainly Lars,
we are
start, especially on data. Or go on, Izabel, if you like.
Yes, thank you. We are, especially in this COVID crisis, we are one of top 3 partners with WhatsApp. So we provided COVID bots for many countries in and outside of Europe. This is kind of maybe way to make it more understanding what are we actually providing. So we're providing this messaging infrastructure, and together with WhatsApp, per each country, per each either government or health institution, we provided COVID bots on WhatsApp, and we do it, I think, really well in Croatia. Of course, being at home with adding some AI capabilities in this bot. I think this showed the very good case that actually digitalization can help much faster in case of crisis. And I think everyone should learn that the digitalization is something that really needs to happen, and it will make things happening faster and in more quality way, and everyone will benefit by introducing such tools. It's also a great lesson for all these institutions and governments that are usually slower than businesses, that things can be done really, and it will be on the benefit of everyone. So I think this is a great direction to go in terms of digitalization generally in EU. And related some differences, I'm not sure if USA really we can say that they handled it better. Depends on the perspective. And here in EU, it's really also very dependent on the per country basis, how fast it can be done or how fast it has been done or how slow. It's really a case by case example. It also showed that to do something like this, to agree about all the GDPR requirements, other regulations, either EU or local regulations, it quite takes some time. A lot of people, a lot of different parts of the government involved, and needs to be part of the project to be able to execute everything. We should learn here that these things should be much smoother to be able to execute much faster, because this is what we need. You mentioned already that things are really changing fast, and we must be able to adapt to use this speed and to behave like it's normal situation in normal situations in such a way, not only when there is a crisis.
And Lars, on your side in Germany, do you think that maybe for the COVID 2021, will we be ready in Europe to share and use more efficiently all the data in Europe?
Well, at least I hope that we would cope with the situation better than we did. And I do not hope that we will come across the next COVID crisis next year or so. But yeah, well, what could have been better than in this current situation? So although, well, in Germany, for example, it was quite smoothly how we well cope with the situation, and so it was not so bad. But well, when it comes to really the digital world, I'm not really convinced what we created and what we came up with. So who really did a good job in the crisis? It was the logistics sector, because there was everything, always everything in the shelf, and although there were a lot of challenges in well, crossing the borders and so on, there was no real logistic problem. But when it comes to IT and data, I think a lot more could have happened, and a lot faster. So well, that's on the well, concrete view. Perhaps a little bit more on the strategic view. I think what we started with the European strategy for data, this is what exactly would have been needed to speed things up, because what we see that still, well, very easy action like sharing data from one municipality to the next about well, the number of ill people or so, obviously is still a problem, and I think that is not to believe. And therefore, we have to really make the European data space happen, not only as an economic project for the digital single market, but also as a concept for data economy, breathing all the European values which we discussed already before. So really this sovereignty aspect. And I think that we really have to see and we have to create awareness that data spaces is really a new paradigm. So then we have to differently view on how to well, share and work with data. So it's on the personal side, we solved a lot of it with GDPR, but on the B2B data sharing, a lot has to still to be done. So the new paradigm would compromise that we have federated data, really federated data architectures, and that we have coexistence of data set, and it is like this. So one data set can be used in different settings, and we have concepts like data visiting, and we have data networks. So we have to see that data should be able to move a lot faster through networks, so that we really can create insights out of it and really create value on this space. So, and well, to draw a picture, so data should move in data spaces like well, like a child should move when leaving the house and move inside the world. And well, data is an asset, and a child is probably the highest value that you have in your life. So you want to protect it. So when talking about data, we have to see that it really can move independently, but also self-assured and resilient to the outside world. And today our data infrastructure is not built like this, and we have to make this happen. We have to create data spaces which can provide this, so that we can really share data with good conscience, because today we can't. We are all hesitating when it comes to data sharing still, and it's the same in business. And if we really come up with this, this will be really a cradle for AI and for the new age in data economy. And then we will bring in place all the values, the European values we are all talking about, like the FAIR principles, federation, non-discriminatory, transparency, access, and so on and so on. Then we really can talk about data spaces where we can well, combine data sets where nesting and overlaps of data spaces are possible, and then we can really create a lot more value, because we can have access to a lot more data sets, to a lot larger data pool than today. And this really has to change from my perspective. And I think we are on the right direction, but it has to be done now.
Yes, indeed, and to do that, indeed, Lars, based on what you said just before, Yann, we touch that during the crisis, relation of people to data really changed, and as well on the privacy. But it looks like there is also a balance between saving life for on the other side, but also saving job on the economic side. And based on what you said just before, I do consider we will be able to be more confident on how to share our personal data, but also on how we can trust in companies that will use this data.
I'm no longer muted. Well, it's all about the well, bridging this gap between well, creating the insight that we should share data. So I think that is what the COVID crisis really did. So well, the last person who had to be convinced that data sharing is necessary has probably been convinced through this crisis. So I think this part of the balance has been done. But on the other hand side, we really have to reassure those people and the companies that there are really profound mechanisms to really secure or safeguard well, data sovereignty or the data set in itself, so that they are really willing to share data, to provide data, to give data to someone else, as long as we know what is happening with the data, and that only this happens what I intend to do. And well, so in the private sector, or in the private sector, yeah, it has been the problem that people do not trust whatever an app for this corona tracking or whatever, because they don't know what happens to the data. Well, it's one story, but it's the same story for companies, because they just are not sure about it. And that is what we have to really set up, these consciousness that well, there's an infrastructure where my data is really safe, and that we then can really gain something out of it and create benefit. So for a better corona, fight, but on the one hand side, but also just more economic prospering with AI, for example. And well, I think it's still a way, and I hope that we learned some insights in the last month. And well, we will see how fast Gaia X will become reality, I think.
So, and Yann, maybe on your side on data relationship of people.
So what's interesting in the two contributions, from Izabel and from Lars, is that in fact we may be witnessing a sort of dissonance between the need for speed, and there's a comment about that in the chat about the US and China being really ahead in terms of patents and data capture, for instance, if you look at face recognition in China. So we have a dissonance to deal with, primarily because we are comparing ourselves to two large economies with huge velocity, number one. And these two economies, they also have extreme directions, one of which is extremely liberal, the West, and China, which is extremely directive. And so we are caught between the need for speed, which we're not. Speed does not qualify Europe in that sense. And we are neither extremely liberal like the US in terms of markets, nor extremely directive like China. And so either we decide to change paradigm as a society, or we embrace who we are. So coming back to my idea of Renaissance 2.0, what Lars is describing is a very abstract layer. It's an abstraction on data. If you can think of data as a capsule itself, well, there's no reason why you can't transfer the capsule between one realm and the other. And so, concepts such as anonymization, encryption, and all these things are tools that we need to embrace in order to implement these things. Now, this requires a little more complex thinking, but I think as Europeans, we are equipped with this idea of complex thinking because we are a complex society made of multiple countries with different cultures. So we can blend these ideas together, and we can compose and create a third way, which is neither like the US, neither like China. We need to embrace the fact that we do not have the same velocity. Perhaps we don't have to have the same, velocity and live in the same momentum. And instead, and we've discussed this, Antoine, I think 6 months ago, I am actually convinced that we have lost, as Europeans, the data collection war. In other words, we do not collect data easily. GDPR actually prevents us to do so in some ways. And so we lose our ability to capture big data at scale. We don't even have the guts, the authority, the capability to do face recognition at scale. It just doesn't work. We're not wired for that. And citizens don't want it either, which is fine. My theory is that, AI, for instance, if you look at AI, which is built on data, produces a new set of data, the models, computation models, so that you can infer, say, from deep learning and infer from a model which is based on behavioral or live data. So once you have these models, then you no longer need the same amount of data, and so that model down the line might be available off the shelf, even from US providers or Asian providers. And so what we really need to do as Europeans is to embrace not the necessity to catch up on speed or in methodology, but rather to capture the imagination of project managers across every single layer of our society so that they can seize the opportunity that inference, for instance, at scale, can provide them with in their project. In other words, how do you optimize logistics? How do you optimize queue lines? How do you optimize ordering mechanisms through models which may have been pre-computed off the shelf. In other words, the battle is down the line. The battle is 5 years from now. Will we have embraced the tools using our own values, right? So being fine with the fact that there's no binary choice. It's not, we're going to go with, say, a big tech company by default. No, we're going to pick and choose. We're going to build a complex data model that fits our culture, fits our bare requirements. And in that sense, I would say, okay, well, let's embrace who we are. Let's not compromise. Let's not compromise on the values and the models that we wish for our society. And in fact, if we think even further, let's think about our children. What society do we want for them? And so to answer that question, we actually can play a role in shaping the data collection, the data implementation, the data transfer, and everything that goes with it. So my thinking is one that is very optimistic, which actually, pushes the projection to the next battle, which is how do we deeply transform the society so that we do implement with the tools and the values that are our own. So this is this is what I think is the main challenge. It's actually not a technical challenge. It's more of a societal challenge.
Okay, thanks a lot, Yann. Maybe just before to move to question, first, thanks to all of you to share all this stuff with the audience. Maybe I would like for each of you to have two words of conclusion. One, because Yann told us that we must think the future, but the future is also a step-by-step way to go. So first word about what for you is the first step, which must be done for Europe to go to the digital competition. And the second one maybe is what is the main benefit for a company to move to AI and data. Just in 2 words and in less than 3 minutes, 1 minute for each.
Okay, from my point of view, I think the most important is to work very closely with both established companies and startups and help them expand globally and do the global business. And to data usage, let's also create full platform. So it's not only technical, it's not only regulations, it's all together, and keep an eye on it to fine tune, to enable, the balance that you were mentioning between two sides, because this will give us opportunity to grow and to fight against competitors on a global level.
Yeah, well, I think it is really to get going now, to really start doing all or realizing the ideas we do have. I think we have nearly everything at our hands of what we talked about, and we have a lot of expertise in Europe. So we have, as Izabel mentioned, we have large corporates which can drive and motivate things. We have the technical expertise. We have a great startup community. So I think we have to just do things. So I hope that we can focus on some great endeavors. So perhaps it may be Gaia-X, perhaps it's something else. I would like to see AI for EU really prosper. And I think learning from each other, building up capabilities on data and how to use it in order to come up with a great AI, as Yann mentioned. That is most important.
Yeah, in fact, my goal is to convince Izabel that Gaia-X, for instance, may very well be sufficient for you to conquer the world. In other words, EU providers do have global footprint. And so Gaia-X is only an answer to our own needs, but not limited to. In other words, a cloud provider, once combined with a CDN, has global reach, right? So it's a combination, and it's true that, I don't know the nature of the audience who's listening to us today, but things are extremely complex if we talk about the different layers, the different types of software, different types of data, different types of algorithms, between the training on the server side and the inference at scale, maybe on IoT side. There are so many moving parts, but if you assemble all of the European players, we probably do have absolutely everything. So to me, it's a marketing issue, and we need to trust ourselves that we can achieve that in Europe, for Europe, and beyond.
So thanks a lot, Lars, Izabel, and Yann. I will move to the questions. First, the most voted question is a question from Sheila Belanijad. The question is, it was mentioned earlier that there is some interesting strategic collaboration with Canada. What are the initiatives to strengthen the relationship? On the topic of AI, is the focus on academics or a combination of industry and academy? So I just put a link to the launch of the global partnership on AI which was launched by France and Canada, which is quite wider, even with Japan and so on. So it's mainly the base is mainly on ethics at the beginning. But there are different questions which the target of the GPIA is mainly to create a framework on how to manage data, how to create responsible data, trustworthy AI, and so on. So it's not only a combination of industry and academy, but also a framework to work on AI and data. I don't know if any of you would like to add something on GPIA, but okay. The second question, which is, how is the status of Gaia platform to become independent of US and China? So maybe Yann and Lars.
So Lars, do you want to comment about the legal structure?
Yeah, well, legally, so there's the Gaia-X Foundation to be founded, which will be in charge for the development of Gaia-X. Well, this is an open association. It's a non-profit association where essentially every company from all over the world is invited. So this is on the one hand side what we really defined in Gaia-X. So we have to work on a global scale, and we have to take all the requirements, but we have to build European values inside. So we have to, from a technical perspective, to integrate all these issues of sovereignty into the architectural solution that we come up with, and this is the opportunity we do have with Gaia-X. So everyone from US and China is invited to join, as long as they play along our rules, which we define in the architecture and which we can assess and enforce via a future certification on Gaia-X. So Yann, you may add.
Yeah, so the association will be incorporated as a non-profit in Belgium, and there are 22 founding members. So American companies are not founding members. The governance does not include companies that are extraterritorial. However, any company in the world who plays by the rules is welcome to join, of course, and that's the idea. In other words, the idea is to give a level playing field, right? So that within Europe we can have the trust. And when we talk about sovereignty, it's really about risk management at the geopolitical level. well, this initiative is not created for nothing. As we've seen during the COVID crisis, and also it started slightly before with the trade war, ping pong between China and the US. What happens if these two start fighting seriously against each other, and suddenly they require all of the computing power for their own needs? Well, we end up with nothing, right? So the notion of sovereignty is really something that has fundamental significance as a territory, which is Europe. So that's the rules of engagement are the ones defined by the vehicle.
Sorry, I have just a small connection problem. I will be back. I think that the next question is about AI infrastructure, which are quite. I don't have the question, so it's not such easy for me. But I think that the question is AI is quite.
So I'll read it. Yeah, I think everyone should be able to read it. It's about certification or standards to make infrastructure European compliant. While GaiaX clearly is mostly concerned about cloud infrastructure, and then of course data on top of that. I think too much certification will kill the initiative. So we don't need more certification. What we do need is some sort of a mainstream approach, and the standards do exist. When I think about storage, for instance, well, Amazon has sort of made S3 a standard. Well, maybe it was proprietary at first, but now it's a standard, and so why not look at that as a standard? That's not an issue. Once the protocol is publicly available, then we can use that as a standard. And these things sort of emerge by themselves. So GaiaX is really about connecting on a main, backbone of sorts. It's not so much about certification. Maybe Lars, you want to?
Thanks a lot. Maybe something else, Lars? It's okay. There is also a question. Okay. A question on to develop collectively new ideas and innovation. Is there any design thinking European lab? I don't think that there is European lab already existing, but in France we have indeed design thinking lab with a company like Strat. But I don't know if any of you know something like that.
Now, maybe someone has in the audience has an answer to that. Perhaps share it in the chat.
Well, I don't have I don't know of anything about this, but I like the idea of having design thinking European lab on digital sovereignty. Because when shaping GaiaX, for example, in the last month, we were really struggling a lot on explaining why we really need it. And I think the discussion today gave us several answers on why we need something like this. But I do not know a place where to further discuss this. So I would really like to have like a think tank on this on European level. So, keep me updated on this. I would like to see it happen.
Okay, there is also a question which is quite interesting about do we want to have our value-based AI as a differentiator on the global market, or do we want to make our values globally accepted? It's a bit philosophical, but quite interesting.
I think it's geopolitical. It's geopolitical.
Not only, it's only business. Do we want to keep our value, but to make our value a differentiation on business? our value to be global?
I would say both. And it reminds me of the soft power that Europe can have. If you look at GDPR created a sort of a shield for EU citizens. And if you look at Facebook and how Facebook had to adjust its own playbook because of GDPR, somehow GDPR made its way to California, because the common denominator in a conversation, say on Messenger, involves both EU chatters and US chatters, and as a result, you need to protect both users in the same way. And so GDPR was exported very quickly to California in some ways. So the EU soft power should be that precisely. We want it for ourselves, and we want to actually distribute our values globally as well, because we believe strongly in them. But that's, again, it's not mutually exclusive. We want the best of Chinese values to be exported to us. We want the best of US values to be exported to us, so that we can blend as a human society. So absolutely, I think we want both.
There's also a question about, is there a benchmark of a European digital solution? On our side, with the France IA, but also with other hubs in Europe, especially in Germany, but also in the Nordics. We will release a new, at least a first landscape of AI startups for climate. I think in September or something like that, end of summer. So it will be a first landscape of AI startup on climate, but maybe all the benchmarks. And by the way, we are also preparing a real benchmark on the difference between European AI infrastructure and also US and China AI infrastructure, such as AWS, Azure, Alibaba, Tencent, to understand the different stacks which are available, which are not yet as standard as we can think. For example, there are some differentiation between how you can compute and how you can have some serverless computation, or how you can parallelize some services and so on. And so indeed the level on how you can compute or store the data are not exactly the same based on the different cloud. And that's very interesting, because indeed it's also one of the key differentiator between the different cloud platform for AI, I think, because it's not the first thing you look at when you launch an AI project, but if you want to really compete globally into AI infrastructure, you need to have at least a certain level of services, of managed services which are available. If you don't have that, you are not in the competition. So indeed, when the question is there any benchmark on that, there is no real benchmark. It's not really standardized. As Izabel said, indeed, in the telecom side, most of the infrastructure are quite standardized, and you know what you buy. It's not yet the case on the AI side, and I really think that if we will want really to be global and to be able to be compared, we need to have this level of benchmark and of at least of standardization of benchmark, which is really not the case today. If you want to add anything, I think that now we we have quite all the questions. I missed one. One is missing, but I don't really. The question. One of the question is if we want to go global, there is a gap between the potential European data space and the will to be a global competitor, and so how you can bridge the gap between being European and sharing data at the European level, but as well being global, and so have also a global proposition on how to use and share data. Lars, maybe no.
Well, I think that is exactly the change of mindset which I mentioned when it comes to the paradigm shift to data spaces. So and these ideas. So Yann called it the capsule of data as a capsule traveling through data spaces. So if we can make the data set as resilient as possible, so and attach usage constraints to it, so that we know what happens to the data, and if the infrastructure is able to deal with that, then it may also move somewhere else. And perhaps then, as soon as it leaves, for example, this super trustworthy European data space, then some value from the data set will be put away, so that only something else can be reused, which is used also today, because value chains are global, and I think. We should convince the rest of the world that this idea of data spaces is a good one, and that it will be beneficial for everyone who would like to join. And as we have a lot of powerful companies and value-creating networks in Europe, I think we should try to become forerunners for at least in some domains. It will not work everywhere, and it will not work in social media or whatever, but in some domains it may work. So that should be an idea or goal. So
thanks a lot. I think we are at the end of the panel, so I would like to keep the time. And any additional point you would like to add, Izabel, Lars, or Yann? Or it's okay?
All good.
Okay, so
all good. Thank you for inviting.
Thanks to share all this stuff with everybody. Thanks to all the audience. We are quite a lot this afternoon. It was very interesting. It was I think it was a lot of things for thought to create this European AI infrastructure, strong and global, and I think now I transfer the. I don't really always can make it, but so maybe I leave. Thanks a lot. Thanks to all of you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Antoine. Bye bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, you all. Tschüss, Lars.
Tschüss, Lars. Thank you very much, everyone. We have officially come to the end of our today's program. I would like to thank everyone who stayed all the way from early morning to late afternoon and participated in our first ever European AI Forum and had the ability to interact with other people, connect, ask questions. It was really super exciting.
Yeah, the interaction was amazing.
Amazing. I would just like to add that we will make the recording of this whole conference available via YouTube link. It will be sent to each and everyone who registered for the forum via email, so you don't have to worry about that, and can be shared for later viewing as well. I'm especially proud that at this last day of the Croatian presidency, we ended on such a high note. We give over to our German colleagues, and we hope that they continue carrying this really, really heavy burden on their backs too. Gael, what was your opinion of the whole thing?
Well, I think the forum today, and some participants mentioned it, the forum has a real utility. And I think this was today the first edition of this European AI Forum, and I'm sure it's not the last one. On the contrary, I think with CroAI, with KI-Verband and with Francia and all other AI associations in Europe, we're keen on going on discussing about European AI in the context of the European AI agenda, including the presidency. So now I'm saying goodbye, au revoir, but I will say bonjour in some month. Goodbye.
Yeah. Thank you, Gael, and thank you for all your support. And thank you to Julien, Arthur, Axel, Micho for presenting a nearly perfectly conference we had today with a very interesting panel. Thank you to all the speakers, all the video statements. Thanks especially to Daniel and Millie, who got us the heavy hitters from the European Commission as a video statement. We are very thankful for it. We are very thankful for all what we achieved today. Thank you for Yann for inviting me. It was very nice staying here. Thank you, Gael. And
thank you too, Yann and Daniel. Thank you to all participants.
Auf Wiedersehen und hoffentlich bis bald und vielen Dank.
Hvala lijepa i doviđenja. Vidimo se uskoro.